Over the past year, Boston's parks and open spaces have gained in critical importance, even as many of their normal uses have been restricted. Those spaces have gotten new support in recent years from the Community Preservation Act, but more than 100 groups are asking for even more help. That's the message in a letter being circulated by the collective group Boston Park Advocates. Joining us are two of its leaders, the president of the Friends of the Public Garden, Elizabeth Vizza, and the executive director of the All Dorchester Sports League, Candice Gartley. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us.
Great to be here.
Liz, I usually talk to you under another hat, but tell us a little bit about the Boston Park Advocates, because this is more than 100 organizations, isn't it?
Well, I love that I'm coming with that hat on, because it's really important that we as park advocates speak with one voice in the city. That we all obviously have specific parks, and there are many friends groups that focus on the care and improvement of specific parks and advocating for them. But it's important, we feel, in the parks advocacy community, that we also have a larger voice that doesn't divide and conquer, that says everyone in Boston cares about our parks. And as you said in the intro, you're absolutely right. The green spaces were more important this year than ever before. We have an e-blast that goes out to over 570 subscribers. We started out years ago in terms of advocacy in the 80s of having a 501c3, a nonprofit, the Boston Green Space Alliance. Post Proposition 2.5, public services were gutted, the parks were in terrible shape. Fast forward to today, we did not hold on to that for long because it was hard to have yet another nonprofit. So in 2005, the idea of a network was born, and to have a loosely affiliated group of people that care about parks to come together and advocate on their behalf, particularly in terms of the budget for the Parks Department, because we still get only less than 1% of the budget going to parks, and that's really something that has to change. So we're excited to be able to speak with one voice from every neighborhood, because we really are at the core talking about this elementally important thing, which is green space.
Candice, what concerns you the most about the state of the parks?
Well, as Liz said, I think being part of Boston Parks Advocate, we're stronger together, and I bring the perspective from the small neighborhood park. And what I see, and I know it is not unique to Doherty Gibson Fields in Infields Corner in Dorchester, is that there is a perception of safety, of lack of care on occasion, because the Parks Department, they're spread very thin across the whole parks in Boston. And we've been trying to change that perspective by activating the parks, by being in better communication with our colleagues at the Parks Department around small things, cosmetic things. You know, we want the grass mowed and the trees trimmed, and we've connected with our community at that level to engage them, to be a partner in loving our parks, because the parks can't do it all. And I know that even though I run a sports league, we are intimately involved in the day-to-day care of this park, the people who visit it, that the people in the community who come and use the parks for their games or for a picnic. And I think it's vitally important that we activate these parks and we make them attractive places so that they'll become even more of a greater resource to the families in the neighborhood who have been in isolation for such a long time, and they really need to get out and come to a safe place where they can just change their day-to-day routine from this awful pandemic we've been in.
Park complex you mentioned in Fields Corner, which I always thought of as mainly town field, but you have these other parts that are around the baseball diamond. Some of it's just benches, a place where you can sit and be in the shade for a while. We're used to this in the city. You know, people stay there, they eat food, the wrappers hang around, they don't get picked up. Sometimes the trash barrels are overflowing. Is that such a big deal?
Yes, it is. It sends a message to the neighborhood that they're not worth being cared for, that their public spaces are not important. And we all know that it's that broken window theory where, you know, you start somewhere and the lack of care just, it sends out a signal that we're just not important as a neighborhood. And I know that's not that's not the signal that the city wants to send out. It's just that we need to have a combination of financial resources and social capital to address these issues like litter or loitering, or because every day we'll come out and pick up the bottles or the nips or the bags and what have you. And it's not my job to do it, but it's my neighborhood, and I want my neighborhood to be the best it can be for me and for my neighbors and for the families who we serve.
Liz, what about resources as far as the amount of money that's out there for parks and other kinds of open spaces?
You know, as I said in the beginning, we have less than 1% of the city budget going to parks. And it's particularly now coming out of this economic devastation and pandemic, there will be a lot of challenges for resources and a lot of competing interests and needs, dire needs for resources. That said, I think what Candice is saying and what I am saying is that parks aren't amenities, they are necessities. And actually last year in the park budget, there was a second shift that was approved. It would go out of Franklin Park. The biggest challenge is maintenance. And now particularly there are a lot of people using the park in different ways, parks in different ways. The common and the garden and the mall over the last year was used a lot for dinner, you know, coming and having socially distanced meals. So when you talk about the garbage cans, they were overflowing in all three of those parks too. And it was a good news, bad news. People were out there, you know, enjoying it and taking rest and respite from it, but it was a bigger challenge. So there is a need for the money to support that basic maintenance. And when you see an overflowing garbage can, you know that the challenges to the Parks Department staff is that they maybe don't have that second shift, or it's a weekend and they're not on the weekend. So we just need to, you know, sort of shine a light on those little things that become big things that the Parks Department wants to do and they can't always do, but needs to be done.
Well, speaking of little big things, the parks budget also covers animal control, and I guess you've got the worst of two things in a way here, because there are more pets now because of the pandemic, maybe, and less money coming in from licensing fees.
Absolutely. You know, we do have that in our letter as the need for more support for that. It doesn't sound like a big thing until it becomes a big thing. As you say, a lot of dogs out there, a lot of people are loving their pets, their pandemic pets. And there are a lot of people that are taking them off leash in parks and places where they shouldn't be. So there needs to be, if we have rules, we need to have enforcement, because these parks are for everybody. We want to make sure that everybody is able to equally use and enjoy them, so that one user group does not dominate, or the outcome of the one user group not playing by the rules does not impact others.
Candice, what about activities? I mean, organized activities in the park. I know these were cut back during the pandemic, but some of that was going on, and there were attempts to make it accessible to people. What should be the response to that in the budget going forward?
Well, we got really creative once the concern of safety because of the pandemic kicked in, and we have a 6-acre park that became our saving grace for our programs. We were able to move our fitness programs outside. We also reached out to other organizations in Infields Corner to have their programs come, and we had a socially distant festival out there that was very carefully coordinated with some area organizations. We also partnered with the local health center, and we set up a COVID testing tent in the field. So these are the kind of things that we can use our parks for, in addition to the activities. We were able to run a 3-season softball program for our girls, with a lot of planning from neighborhood activists and our volunteers. And we had almost 200 girls in the middle of a pandemic to come out and play. So that sends a message that there is a tremendous need for parks to be standing by and be ready to take on these additional numbers. And I know the need is going to be even more intense than last year. We opened our softball registration on Monday, and within 4 hours, we've had close to 160 families sign up. That is unprecedented in the history of ADSL. And I am really waiting for the floodgates to open once we start opening our other programs. Our challenge is to make sure the parks are ready and that it is a safe environment for them. And hopefully things will get better as we move through the summer.
What about vendor fees? If I have this correct, I think these might have been rolled back or waived during the pandemic. And I guess my question is, do you need to continue that for a while?
For the Parks Department, yes. I mean, there does need to be, they've asked a one-time allocation of funding to keep the important activities. I mean, Candice does an amazing job. All Dorchester Sport League does an incredible job out there. And as you hear, there is going to be a floodgate opening. And then throughout the city, the Parks Department has great programming. They did some innovative programming during the pandemic. And again, so much more need even than before because of the pandemic. There was a huge amount of need to get outside, to get together in a safe and safely distanced way. But there are monies that are needed. So since during the pandemic, those fees were waived, it leaves the Parks Department without the resources to cover costs at free or low cost recreational programs. And we want to keep that bar low for everybody to be able to enjoy them.
Candice, I know this is a little bit beyond youth and sports activities, but you have some nice tree-lined streets in Dorchester, and a lot of other neighborhoods don't have enough of that. Even parts of Dorchester maybe could use some more trees. There's part of the letter here that says that the city needs to get more serious about replenishing the canopy. Why is that so important?
I think it's important. I live near Fields Corner. I've lived there for over 3 decades, and I have seen the canopies reduced. I've seen, as a result, I think, of a lot of the development, when the buildings go up, the trees come down. They make room for parking, and then you have the runoff, which is terrible for the environment. And I think regulations around that should be revisited. And I know, as part of one of my jobs is I am part of the Cotton Square Neighborhood Council. And when we have a developer come in front of us, we are always asking about green space, environmental concerns, and what are they going to do to keep the green areas within the new developments. It's a challenge, I think, with the rapid influx of development in Dorchester in particular. We're learning as we go on how to navigate these issues, because it is critical for us to increase the tree canopy in Dorchester, and especially during this time. I guess not only in Dorchester, but in other Boston neighborhoods, as they become increasingly attractive for people to move in. We have to make sure there's green spaces. Otherwise, we go back to people sitting on their front porches with paved parking lots all around them, and there's no place to get out and play, or the asthma rates go up, and it's an unhealthy trend. So I'm hoping that we can really shine some light on this increased tree canopy, not only in Dorchester, but throughout the Boston neighborhoods.
Finally, Liz, I know that this letter has been signed by a lot of the advocates that are normally focused on the parks a great deal, but I guess you're looking for as much support for the public as you can. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing, is there a way they can do that?
Yes, go to Boston Park Advocates website, and you can sign on. We can also get you through Boston Park Advocates email address, which is bostonparkadvocates.com. I'm not sure, Candice, I don't have it in the top of my head right now, but definitely check the website out and make sure that you sign up. We have about 70 individuals and almost 40 organizations that are signed on.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time to be with us. Liz Vizza and Candice Gartley from Boston Park Advocates.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, we'll have more news in just a moment.